You're a man who likes to win, but last night was not an absolute victory for you.
I'll be honest. I thought it was a very close to complete victory.
You just cannot get your head around the degree of suffering that went on. So the only thing I think is to tell stories, personal stories.
You know this thing about if you can't see it, you can't be it? BAME employment in film in this country is 3%. We're not seeing ourselves in these key positions.
I think it inspires somebody who even isn't a model to be able to love themselves and see that if we're confident in what we feel, they can be too.
Never one to admit defeat, Donald Trump has framed his party's election losses as a complete victory.
Tomorrow will be a new day in America, the words of Nancy Pelosi, the leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, as her party took control of the House from the Republicans.
A Democratic Congress will work for solutions that bring us together.
When my status as an immigrant, black, Muslim woman means that the current administration does not see me as an American, you know I will not bow down.
The Republicans have held the upper house, including the seat here in Texas, where Ted Cruz fought off the high-profile challenge of Beto O'Rourke.
Tonight is a victory for all the men and women in this room and all the men and women across this state that poured your hearts, your passion, your time, your energy to rising to defend Texas.
If the midterm elections were a referendum on Donald Trump, the president seems pretty happy with the result, calling the night a tremendous success.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News. You're a man who likes to win, but last night was not an absolute victory for you.
I'll be honest. I thought it was a very close to complete victory. When you look at it from the standpoint of negotiation, when you look at it from the standpoint of deal making, because it's all about deal making, again, if we had the majority and we had 1 or 2 or 3 votes to play with, we would have been at a standstill. I really believe that we have a chance to get along very well with the Democrats. And if that's the case, we can do a tremendous amount of legislation and get it approved by both parties. So I consider it to be, hey, look, I won Georgia. President Obama campaigned very hard in Georgia. Oprah Winfrey campaigned very, very hard all over the television. I said, this is going to be tough. I only had me. I didn't have anybody else. And I went to Georgia, and we had one of the largest crowds that anybody here has seen ever at a political rally. And you know what? He won. And he won actually by, pretty good margin. He won. I think it was a great victory. I'll be honest. I think it was a great victory. And actually, some of the news this morning was that it was, in fact, a great victory. But if you look at it from the standpoint of gridlock, I really believe there's going to be much less gridlock because of the way this is going than any other way.
Kellyanne, how much more difficult do you expect things to get with a Democrat House?
That's really a question for the Democrats, because the president is the ultimate deal maker and negotiator. He has proven, even in the first 2 years with Republican rule here in Washington, that he's been willing to do deals with the Democrats. He signed into law very recently an historic opioid legislative law that had the support of every single Democrat in the House and Senate. He also was willing to make a deal almost a year ago on DACA, on the so-called Dreamers. Democrats walked away from the table. The Congress needs to act, and if Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in Congress spend all of their time on impeachment investigations, subpoenas, they'll be held to account from their voters. They will basically hand the election and re-election to Donald Trump in 2020 if they do that. So they're calling for unity. They need to go first. They need to present to the president their proposals, their ideas, and he will consider them like he does everything else.
I'm going to tell you about the incredible true story of a detective who chose to go undercover for 20 years posing as a paedophile.
Ian James subsequently saved dozens of children from abuse and sent to prison many who were a danger to society.
It's very difficult to actually comprehend and understand how you can actually engage and work with these individuals. You have to break down a lot of barriers to be sort of accepted by them, because everything that you're doing is totally against you as a human being. I'm a parent with 2 young children, and I have got to go through certain barriers. So I've got to deal with images, I've got to look at images, because if you can't deal with looking at an image, then you put a child at risk, you potentially put yourself at risk. So on top of that, you've then got to say, right, I've got to talk sexually about the image. You've got
to be plausible.
You've got to be plausible, because they'll expect to analyse everything that you do.
Were you able to go home at the end of the day, for want of a better word, and put it in a box and it not seep into your normal life?
You've got to have very good support mechanisms around you, because this is unique. Very few people do it. My wife was extremely supportive, fully understood what I was doing, so that was great within the family circle. I had a fantastic psychologist who was looking after me, and my managers were very, very supportive, and you need that because it's a long process.
I should imagine every year you thought to yourself, why on earth am I doing this? I've done this too long. But the problem, I imagine, becomes the longer you do it, the more useful you are to the operation, more indispensable you become.
Yeah, I think a very good friend of mine said to me, well, if you can save one child, then you've achieved quite a lot.
How many did you save, do you think?
Probably around about 50, probably.
And, you know, undercover policing's had a bad rep in recent years, hasn't it? But
yes.
You can point to the fact you've saved lives by being an undercover police officer.
Yeah, I'm proud of what I've done. And there are many officers out there who have done undercover work in various fields, and they've made a difference. And they themselves would be proud. I have a duty of care to children, and ultimately, whatever happens in an operation, the child comes first, and that's the most important thing.
As darkness falls, a traditional call to remembrance echoes over 1,000-year-old stones. But then yeoman warders join a cadet, a veteran and a serving soldier in lighting thousands of lamps around the moat of the Tower of London. Those who make the Tower their home say the moat is a special place.
I thought about the song because this is such a hollow piece of ground. The moat here is where a lot of guys came, swore allegiance for the First World War, before they went to the front, got kitted out, got trained here, and most of those guys didn't come back. I just felt in some small way, if we could just bring them back just once more, just to lay them on the ground of this country once more, is something really worth doing.
This unique and poignant spectacle is the culmination of 5 years' work by the artist Rob Hurd, who spent 15,000 hours hand-making 72,396 shrouded figures.
It was just about physicalising that number and creating a figure for every one of those names. And it was so important that it was actually, each figure is associated with a name. As I'd make a figure, it would be crossed off a great volumes of books I've got. And that was so vitally important that these weren't just a collection of images, they are actually representing an individual.
So tell me, where are we?
Well, this is where I store some of the figures, and this is where I've worked for several years down here, which is it's quite a place. It really is. It's amazing to be in their company. It's an odd thing to say, but as a sense of perspective, it's like nothing else. I always read the name aloud when I cross it off. I always read the name aloud, which is important, just for one more time.
It's very overwhelming being in here.
Yeah, it gets me every time.
Remembrance has to be personal. I think this is the trouble with remembrance, is that yes, we have these important symbols, they are important, and we have the figures. We know how many millions of people died on the British side, the French side, the German side.
That's what they taught in the history classroom.
Exactly, and we know how many millions came over from India, from Africa. This was a world war. It's enough to say it was a world war. For anyone, you can't get your head around that. You just cannot get your head around the degree of suffering that went on. So the only thing I think is to tell stories personal stories. Now they can be true, they can be about your great uncle, your great great grandfather. Or you can do what I do, is you base it on truth and then you take it a stage further and you make fiction of it, and there's a different kind of truth in fiction. And what's good about that is the child can then identify with a soldier, because otherwise all those soldiers out there now, and they're all gone. Anyone who knows them or knew them is gone as well. So effectively they're all unknown soldiers now. They're all unknown soldiers. So the only way to get to know one is to know a story.
What does the poppy mean to you?
My uncle Peter was killed at age 21 in the RAF in the Second World War. So to me he was a photograph on a mantelpiece, nothing more. But you know when you're young and you see your mother cry, well, you don't forget it. And my mother was not a crying woman, generally at all, but on November the 11th and on Uncle Peter's birthday, she was beside herself with grief, and was like that till the end of her life. So what did I learn from that? I learned that this man, the young man, he was 21, he was an actor. He acted at Stratford, he was a whole life ahead of him. Never became a father, never became a grandfather like me, like a great-grandfather like me. He didn't have this chance to fulfill himself. And that touches me, really touches me. So when I put a poppy on a memorial, as I did yesterday in my village, he's the person I think of. So we've, in a sense, it sounds awful, but we are lucky. At least we can connect to that war. It's very hard for children growing up today, to whom war is still, is mostly now an image on film. And thank God, you know, we are not in a world war. We have horrible, vicious little wars going on all over the place. But to kids, it's something on, you know, it's on your tablet, and you look at it, and then you watch The Simpsons. It goes from one to the other. It's not their fault. We do the same thing. It's too painful to watch. But if it's someone you know, then you remember. So it connects up, I think, with your previous question. I think we just have to find our own unknown soldier.
Lenny Henry and Meera Syal are among those who presented a letter to number 10 Downing Street asking for tax breaks for the film and TV industry to address a diversity crisis. Signatories include Thandie Newton and Adrian Lester, and the letter argues that an increase in employment of women, disabled people and people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds behind the camera is crucial.
There are several fronts being fought at the moment, and I think what's great is we're in a position where people are genuinely interested in making change. They haven't got the ideas particularly. I mean, we've worked out that tax breaks will be a good thing because we've seen it happen in Chicago, and there are other states now following. Maybe New York State will follow tax relief for diversity in film and television. We think it's a good idea. Somebody else should work out the details, but you know, we're already via the BFI and various other people giving tax breaks for things that are British subject matter, British cast, British production, and it would be a fantastic thing to give tax breaks, tax relief for diversity, more women, more people of colour, people with disability, because the figures as they stand in our industry are still appalling, and it needs to be changed. And I think that the more we talk about it, the more everybody can see, the more things are transparent and everything's out there, everybody can see, well, this is obviously a problem, things need to be done. I mean, there's, you know, BAME employment in film in this country is 3%. So 3% of the people that work on films and television in this country are Black, Asian, minority ethnic. You know, when you consider that places like London, for instance, is 40% BAME, that's a really lopsided figure. Working in film, there are 13.6% women directors working in film in this country. On something like EastEnders, women directors are 1%, BAME directors are 1%, sorry. And 0.3% of the working film industry are people with disabilities. So, you know this thing about if you can't see it, you can't be it? We're not seeing ourselves in these key positions. There are many BAME producers out there who are more than capable of commissioning, more than capable of green lighting things, more than capable of looking at things and going, that's good, you know, let's find that writer, that's good, let's hire that production designer. More than capable. And they've hit a wall, they've hit a ceiling, and we need to start thinking of ways of dismantling those walls and ceilings. How do we make it easier for more women to be in the industry, more people with disability, more BAME? How do we make it a bit easier so that it's not just a struggle? You know, people in a lot of production companies and a lot of broadcasters, oh, you're pushing against an open door. We want to do this. This is something we want to do. If the door is open, why are we still pushing?
When you think of, oh, I don't know, lingerie models, you tend to imagine the Victoria's Secret's angels resplendent with feathers and diamonds and a size 8 or smaller. Yet, according to official data, the average woman in the UK is a dress size 16 and wears a size 36 double D bra. 89% of women don't feel represented in mainstream fashion. Now the company Simply Be is hoping to change attitudes with a catwalk parade featuring models of all shapes and sizes. The inclusive event is called We're All Angels, and it comes 2 days ahead of the annual Victoria's Secret fashion show.
We're leaps and bounds to where we were 5 years ago, if you think about it. It's all about the steps that the brands take and the risks, and I think that's why today was so important. It's about being able to showcase different sizes. So we had sizes from 10, you know, they go from size 10 to 32, but I believe we had sizes from 10 all the way up to 22 today. So it's one of those things where you get to see different body types with the same brand, being able to be inclusive in one and showing that we all look sexy and confident and that you can have that. I think it inspires somebody who even isn't a model to be able to love themselves and see that if we're confident in what we feel, they can be too.
I tell girls that often write to me and voicing their opinion that they feel bad or they don't love their body to take a break when they need to and look at the world without a filter. And that's what I was quoted recently saying, I want cellulite on a catwalk because everyone really does have it. Even ballerinas have it, or Serena Williams has it, and yet we've made it this really, infamous bad thing to have, but it's a part of our human bodies. So I don't see the qualms in using unretouched photos. I think I'm all for showing who you are, and I think the more of us do it, the more we will all do it.
Now, the author, Jacqueline Wilson, has never shied away from tackling some of society's harshest realities. She's written more than 100 stories discussing everything from divorce, alcoholism, suicide, and of course the care system inhabited by her famous character, Tracy Beaker. Well, in her latest novel, she brings her most loved character back to life. I sat down to talk to her about the launch of her new book, My Mum, Tracy Beaker.
Tracy was a child, say, in a children's home, desperate to be fostered. And I got the original idea because I saw some photos of real children and there was a special campaign to try and get foster parents for them. And I couldn't help wondering, what must it feel like to be in this situation? I didn't really think it would be a particular success.
Your other books as well, they've never really shied away from the harsh realities of life. You've been very upfront and honest with your readers, some of whom are as young as 8 years old. You've covered subjects like abandonment, divorce, alcoholism, poverty, depression, suicide, and of course the care system.
Oh gosh, you do make them sound dire.
Well, it's interesting because how do you find the tone and the language to speak to children? Because these are some subjects that their parents will find it difficult.
Anything violent, anything too upsetting is off the page. It's happened and it will be mentioned, but I would hate to traumatize any child. It's very, very difficult because children nowadays, when they watch television or they look at things on YouTube, they're far more aware than perhaps adults realise.
What do you think children worry about today in 2018? What do you think their main concerns are? Because you're all about putting yourself in the mindset of the child.
There are lots of anguished emails I get from, somebody's friend has gone off with somebody else. I think they're far more worried about the way they look now, and they're worried about bullying. It's the sort of thing that, when I was a child, a dystopian novel would be all about a way that children and young people, their minds are being manipulated. And now, in a sometimes benign way, I think that is happening.
You're back into the groove now with Tracy Beaker. You wouldn't commit to a sequel when I spoke to you about it a little earlier. But now there are so many new themes to explore, and Tracy is an adult dealing with different issues. Are you tempted?
I am tempted because I have been talking to quite a lot of people about my mum, Tracy Beaker, and many people have said, well, come on, what does happen next to Jess and Tracy? So I'm thinking about it. But certainly it won't be the next book, because that's already written and that's something else entirely. But Tracy is there in my head still, so is Jess. I don't think they're going to go away.
Mr. Cameron, how do you feel about Brexit? Have you been advised of Theresa May's son?
No, I'm actually on my way into the Treasury to do something. So I'm not, no time to talk, I'm afraid, now.
Do you have any advice for the Prime Minister about the way things are going?
I'm on my way to the Treasury now. I fully support what she's doing. Want to let her get on with the job.
Go on, get out of it. Go on, get out of it.